Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Content Claim Standard 3.0 Launch. Today's presentation will be recorded and sent out to all registered participants and also will be posted on the Hub. We will have a Q&A portion throughout the presentation. You can type your questions into the question box on the webinar doc. Now on to Trini with Textile Exchange. Trini?
Thank you, Rose, and welcome everyone. Hello to this introduction to the Content Claim Standard 3.0. We are going to give you an overview over the key changes of the Content Claim Standard 3.0. And with me today, I have Carol Hsu, Senior Manager of Global Sustainability at the North Face. And we are going to turn on our videos real quick to say hello. I also have Taylor Jones with me here, our standards coordinator, who will be womaning the Q&A. We are going to tackle a bunch of different things. First, I'm going to give you an overview over Textile Exchange and the standards that we own, to then progress to the introduction to the Content Claim Standard 3.0, and there are 3 areas we will cover: go over the intent and goal, show you the key changes 2.0 versus 3.0, and then give a little bit more information on how the CCS is used. And then towards the end, we will have a conversation with Carol, and we will conclude with questions that you have. So first, let's look at a little bit of info about Textile Exchange. Most of you know that we are a 501c3 nonprofit. We were founded in 2002, originally with a focus on cotton, but over the years we have progressed to also look at other materials in the supply chain. Our mission is to inspire and equip people to accelerate the adoption of preferred fibers and materials, and our focus lies on the carbon reduction, soil health, and water and biodiversity, to drive the impact across the industry. Many of you have heard us talk about our new strategy, the Climate Plus strategy, and we have a bold vision for 2030, which is to enable and guide the textile industry to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 45%. And the focus that we have is to reduce that percentage in the pre-spinning phase of textile fibers and materials production. The plus is often a question that we get, what that stands for. And the plus is really the focus that it is grounded in partnership. We know we cannot go this path alone. So we really rely on our network and everyone involved to help us reach this goal. A little bit more about our team. Textile Exchange has grown drastically in the last couple of years. We are now at over 50 team members across the globe. And right now we are represented in 17 countries, and we are steadily growing. Today, this webinar is brought to you by the standards team. And I wanted to give you an overview real quick over our standards and assurance team, because you may have interacted with some or all of us at different points. And here with me today is Taylor Jones and myself on the bottom left, but you probably have been in touch with multiple of us. Now let's look at the standards that we have. So when we started out, the first standard we started with was the OCS, the Organic Content Claim Standard. And it focuses on tracking organically grown content through the supply chain. The next standards we took on were the recycled standards, initially the Global Recycled Standard, which focuses on eliminating or reducing the use of virgin materials and using more recycled material throughout the supply chain. We split that standard into 2 and also created the RCS, which begins at a lower percentage point of minimum percentage content, and it also does not contain social, environmental, and chemical criteria in the standard. Next, we have a suite of animal-related fiber standards. the responsible down standard, and then we have the responsible wool standard, the responsible mohair standard, and the responsible alpaca standard. A quick word on how we set our standards and how we manage our revisions. We are a full member of ICO. As such, we are bound to follow certain ICO requirements and the codes of good practices for setting standards and also assurance and measuring impact. And you can read more. I copied the link here on our website as well, what that means. But I also want to show you kind of what goes into a standards lifecycle. So it begins at about here 1 o'clock, where we create a terms of reference and we publish a project plan to communicate our plans for this revision, what we want to handle and how. And then we begin an open feedback period on the current standards version that is out in the field. We form an international working group, create a new draft based on the feedback that we've received, and then put out that new draft for public consultation. We receive feedback from the public as well as our IWG and draft a new version or make updates if there are any to the draft. Then our IWG votes on the standard, we implement the standard, and then it continues that we continue to collect learnings for the next revision. A little bit more about the IWG flow, just to show you that it's an iterative process. So for the CCS, we had about 18 meetings that began last year. These meetings are held about twice a month or once a month, depending on the overall month in the year. And it's a very iterative process where we present one topic, we receive comments, we discuss a specific topic, and then we go back to the drawing board to present revised wording, revised criteria to our IWG. So it is a very fluid process. And at this point, I really just also want to give a word of gratitude to our IWG and really everyone who has weighed in during the CCS creation, shared feedback during public comments. We really could not do it without you, and it is greatly appreciated that you choose to spend the time helping us create really good standards in the industry. Now what I wanted to show you is go a little bit more into depth about chain of custody, which is verifying materials from the source to the final product. And the slide that I always like to show is that the dream versus reality. Here on the left-hand side of the screen, we all wish that we were looking at a garment at a retailer store and it would easily tell us what source it came from. But the reality is really much different, where the fibers might be mixed, they might get traded, blended, they travel through different paths throughout the supply chain until it's actually a final garment that's hanging in a store. And our solution to that is the chain of custody. And we manage chain of custody by way of scope certificates and transaction certificates. And I just want to mention, because that is important, that scope certificates apply at the company level. So you are awarded a scope certificate after the successful completion of an audit, whereas the transaction certificate at the top here travels with the product throughout the supply chain. Chain of custody is important because we feel that it drives real and meaningful change, and it also gives a tool to really develop a common language by following the same steps each time. And it also gives you an opportunity to back up your claim that you want to make on products. Now let's look at the CCS 3.0 more specifically, starting with a timeline. So we set out in Q1 2020 with initial research and drafting of the terms of reference, the project plan, verbalizing our goals and objectives, and really getting set up for a good revision. And then we went into a phase of forming our international working group, drafting issue papers, researching more. It's a very iterative process, but also holding the international working group meetings and getting all the brains together to draft the standard, bring it out for public consultation. And then we are now in Q3 actually, but we launched the CCS 3.0 with an effective date of July 1st, 2021. I just wanted to briefly touch base on the goals and the intent and goals of the standard, because it can be summed up easily in one sentence that the goal of the CCS is to ensure the accuracy of the content claims. And the CCS itself is the chain of custody system for all of our existing standards. The slide that I had shown earlier, the CCS is the foundation for all of our different standards. It is a globally applicable standard, and it is used across the supply chain from different entities, going all the way from manufacturers, brands and retailers, traders, CBs, and or organizations supporting specific raw material. And we work with third-party certification bodies that conducted the audit on the ground. One thing, hence I wanted to pull that out, is the application of all our standards is global. Now let's look at some of the requirements as we went from CCS 2.0, which is the previous version, to 3.0. I mentioned earlier during the open feedback phase, and I wanted to show you that briefly, is during the open feedback phase, we collect anything and everything that is not working with the current version of the standard, so CCS 2.0 at the time. And then we categorize topics into major, minor, and out of scope issues. So all feedback that we always hear is heard, is tracked, is evaluated. But then we want to focus on the major issues, basically. And here you can see some of what the major issues are. These are usually the topics we draft issue papers on and make a proposal to our IWG to put our best foot forward in the next version of the standard. Minor issues are topics that we have on the radar, may not necessarily require IWG conversations. They are not any less important than the major issues, but they are handled in a different way. And then there are out of scope issues that you can see here. So we keep those on the radar a lot of times, or all of the time. It's always good feedback. However, it might be out of the scope for that specific standard. And the feedback we receive might be addressed in different work streams, different projects, different areas that we are handling. So today, as I mentioned, effective of July 1st, 2021, we have a new Content Claim Standard 3.0, which you see pictured here to the left. And with every revision or with every release of a new standard, there's really a suite of other documents that go along with the release. And the couple that I want to point out here is the user manual, which gives you more color and more highlight on how to comply with a specific standard. It gives examples. So it is really a good complementary document to learn more about the standard itself. Then there's also the transition policy. So whenever we bring out a standard, it is not mandatory to comply with it immediately. There's usually a transition policy of 1 year. And in that time of 1 year, you are basically allowed to use either or, though we always recommend to aspire and align with the newest standard out. For the CCS, that means that come July 1st, 2022, next year, the requirements of the CCS 3.0 will be mandatory. The fourth document that I want to mention is, and you can actually, the links here are hyperlinked. If you click on it on your screen, it guides you to the document. But we will also be sharing these files, and they are all available on our website as well. But the certification procedures also provide more highlight on what and how things will be audited, also provide more clarity and to auditors. And I'll get into that. I'll pick up on that in a moment as well. We also make available a summary of key changes. There are varying documents. So if just high level, you want to know, okay, well, how does that apply to me? What was CCS 2.0 versus 3.0? The summary of key changes is a great document to look at and get on a minimum amount of pages, a download of the changes. And then lastly, I want to flag the download center. So we have a lot of great documents that we may not have on the individual landing pages on the download center, including a list of available documents also altogether that gives you an overview of all the documents we have for a given standard. Now let's look at CCS more specifically. So one of the bigger changes we made here was really align the structure of the CCS to fit more the logic and the system of our newer standards. So we split out information and combined information and created a new section so that it is easier to follow along and to conform to the standard. So initially, or in CCS 3.0, we split out the general information, section A, and section B, principles of CCS certification, so that information is better categorized. And we also split out section C and section D into management system criteria and processing and handling criteria. Section E is a section we are very excited about, the brand criteria. We had a previous section called brand exemptions in the old CCS 2.0 that we retired. And instead of having a set of exemptions, we drafted actual criteria that brands have to comply with. And we're going to hear more about that with Carol towards the end. Section F, multi-site and group criteria, is a new section that we have with lots of learnings that we had from our animal-related standards that we pulled into the CCS. And we also have Appendix A, definition, where we have a bunch of new criteria as well as existing criteria or modified definitions. And this will come into play when we talk about brands. That is a new definition and a newness in the CCS 3.0. One thing I also want to mention, so in the old CCS 2.0, we had a lot of criteria that pertained to certification bodies. So a big change is also that we pulled out the criteria that only apply to certification bodies and exclusively moved those into the CCS cert procedures so that we have a clear separation between the standard itself and the certification procedures. Now let's look at different scenarios of what CCS 3.0 might mean for different entities in the supply chain. And the first one that I want to mention is the brand. So we have a new definition here for brand, and I'm going to read it out loud. Brand is now defined as an organization that controls the design, development, and purchase of final products for sale under their own name or private label. Brands may sell to wholesalers, retailers, or directly to consumers. This does not include organizations who sell a branded intermediate product for use in further processing steps. Now, as of July 1, 2022, once the transition period is over, brands are required to be within scope of the CCS, meaning brands will have to be certified. And this new rule replaces the seller in the final business-to-business transaction rule that we had in the CCS 2.0. So before it was, if you are a brand, you sell direct only to consumers, you did not have to be certified. If you were selling to direct to consumers and also to retailers, you would have had to be certified because a brand would have been the seller in the final business-to-business transaction in the transaction between the brand and the retailer. gonna hop back to my supply chain model here real quick. So what you see here is certification ends with the brand. However, brand certification is mandatory. And another newness for those very familiar with the slides that we had before is transaction certificates, outgoing transaction certificates from the brand to the retailer are no longer required. Some of you might be familiar, the last bullet point here on the slide, with brand network certification and the 100% exemption rule. So in the old CCS 2.0, we mainly talked about 3 exemptions, and we retired the brand network certification and the 100% exemption rule. Batch coat label will remain an option in 3.0, and yeah. Now let's look at what that means for retailers. CCS 3.0 basically has no significant changes for retailers. Retailers are always out of scope of the certification and don't have to be certified. If you are a fabric mill, you continue to have to be certified to the chain of custody. And one thing that I would like to flag is that there are now stronger requirements to manage your subcontractors that are in place. So we have a whole new section on subcontractors, and you as a organization will have to have contracts with your subcontractors in place. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we go to the subcontractor point of view. From a trader perspective, there is also some newness in CCS 3.0 in that traders without physical possession of product are no longer required to be certified. And I have copied below here a screenshot from the CCS itself. There are criteria in the scope section B12, B13 that talk about more detail who qualifies as a trader. And the audit frequency for traders will correspond to a risk assessment. Coming back to the subcontractors. So we now also have more fleshed out requirements for subcontractors and those who subcontract. So if you're a subcontractor, you're categorized as one of the two, either an associated subcontractor, where you are not independently certified to the standard itself, but you may be audited under your organization's scope certificate. Or alternatively, you are independently certified and you hold your own scope certificate to the standard. And yeah, it's one of those two. The contracting organization will require you to have contracts in place. And that, yeah, means you as a subcontractor will have to have contractors in place with your contracting organization. I now just wanted to, excuse me, look briefly at what else is new. You have seen when we went through the structural changes that there is a new section F on multi-site and group certification to clarify requirements and also adapting the learnings that we gathered from our animal fibers and the responsible down standard. We are beginning to run pilots that are set to begin later this year on multi-site and group certification. And I encourage you to stay in the loop on the things we are doing in standards. We will announce those pilots at that time. On the topic of pilots, we did conduct a mass balance pilot and we'll be releasing the learnings from the mass balance pilot soon. The learnings will result in a separate policy on alternative volume reconciliation that we are still working on, but expect to have an update in around September, October. On the third point here, we sometimes get asked about the tracer technology. That was also a point of feedback we had received during the open feedback round. And I just wanted to flag that there is a partnership with Fashion for Good and pilots running on the assessment framework to include tracer technology. And you may have participated lastly in other webinars and documents about our eTrackIt systems and the electronic version of tracking TCs, SCs through the supply chain. And we are looking at a release of some of the results in November. And next, I would like to welcome Carol Shu, Senior Manager Global Sustainability at the North Face, on board to provide a brand voice to our CCS 3.0. Carol, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Carol, could you tell our audience a little bit more about your background in the sustainability space?
Sure. Yeah, I studied fashion design in undergrad and got really interested in sustainability my senior year and have pretty much worked in the space ever since.
That is great. A path of passion. Can you tell us a little bit more about your work with Textile Exchange and Textile Exchange standards in particular?
Sure. We use your standards as, I would say, guides for our materials team when they're developing new materials. We require certain certifications, and Textile Exchange ones are included in that. And we use them because it helps us feel confident in the sustainability attributes of the materials that we're using in our products. If we want to tell our consumers that something has recycled content, we want to feel confident that it does.
That is great. And I believe the North Face is also included in a lot of other initiatives that we have across our organization and has been a loyal partner over the years. So in terms of brand criteria, Carol, you were one of the members of our international working group who were a driver in requiring brands to be certified. Could you talk a little bit more about why you think that is a good idea for brands to be certified going forward?
Yeah, so we are certified to the Responsible Down Standard, and we have been since 2015. And it is a lot of work, but the benefits of being very confident in, that the down in our case is certified and is ending up in our final products, and we can tell our customers that that down is in the jacket or sleeping bag that they're buying. That value is really important to us. I also think that brand risks are increasing. There's a lot more attention on sustainability. We know that younger consumers are asking for more sustainable products. And so the risks of greenwashing in the marketplace are increasing. And so for us, it's just a good way for us to be certain in what we're selling to our customers.
Mm-hmm. And you have been involved in previous versions of the CCS, so you have firsthand experienced the progress we have made over the years.
Yes. We have made a lot of progress. This year will be my 7th certification cycle for the RDS, and actually went back and looked when we first got certified in 2015. We did a pilot of the brand network certification, and we did 8 audits, including, and then actually 9 because we also had a brand audit. So things have gotten much more streamlined over the years, and I really appreciate the working groups to be able to work through some of the challenges together. It's been a really good process.
Do you have some examples of pain points for a brand like the North Face to implement brand certification?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest pain points is that we do have a pretty broad distribution network. We're a very large global company. We have customers all over the world. And so in the CCS version 2.0, just some of the requirements for managing that broad distribution network were really challenging. And it takes time for your distribution network, so our DCs, our global customers, to get used to the RDS and what it means. And we've continually reinforced that message with them over the years. And so I think that's something to keep in mind, is you want to build up that recognition of the standard you're being certified to with your supply chain and your consumers. And it does take time.
Yes. Thank you for putting that out there. Is there a message that you feel needs to get out to suppliers about the new CCS 3.0?
Yeah, I would say that it is really important for us as a brand to have our full supply chain certified to some of our key standards that we would, that we use, for example, the GRS, because we need that full chain of custody for us at the brand level as well. And I think the streamlining and the CCS version 3.0 has really been a big improvement in terms of clarifying and streamlining some of those requirements. And I would just really encourage that our suppliers adopt certification too.
That is good. And I just want to reiterate for our audience, so that with CCS 3.0, brand certification will be required come next July 2022. That is if you want to make a claim to, or a logo or claim that is to the final product. And yeah, so that means that as a brand, the seller in the final business to business transaction rule is retired, no longer in effect as of next year. However, we encourage everyone to align with the new CCS 3.0 and begin the journey of certification if you are a brand sooner rather than later. And then final, before we dive into questions, I see a few are coming in. Carol, is there any advice that you would give someone just starting out in their certification journey? I imagine we have audience members that are looking at certification for the first time. Mm-hmm. What would you advise them? Where to start, how to put the first foot in front of the next?
Yeah, I would definitely encourage people to plan for a longer period of time to prepare than they would expect. I think the first year I planned for 3 months just to make sure that we had enough time to get everything ready. And I'm on the sustainability team. So, I had to establish relationships with our distribution centers, our sales teams for our global distributors. And it takes a lot of time to talk to all of these internal stakeholders and explain to them what the objective is and why the RDS is important, why getting certified to it is important. And so I would just say plan ahead and make sure that you get that internal buy-in and that you're talking to all the right people. I would say CCS certification or certification to the RDS for us goes beyond just the sustainability team. It reaches so many parts of our brand and our parent company VF that you just need to figure out who you need to work with, who the right stakeholders are, and do all of that educational training too. So the first push is always the hardest. And then once you've established those relationships, it gets easier. And I would say also, I almost exclusively use the user manual because it has that extra information that Trini mentioned. I honestly don't really look at the CCS alone. I always use the user manual. And when we were creating our internal control system, which is now the management system, we pretty much matched it section by section, put it into a Word doc, and had people contribute their appropriate sections to our management system document, and that worked really well. And then also an important part is the content claim standard is going to cover, how you manage your products and the volume reconciliation, checking your transaction certificates as a brand. But don't forget to reference the claims framework for the labeling part, which is very important.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Carol, for joining us to add a little bit more color and a brand voice. We are going to open it up for questions in a moment, but before we do, I just wanted to put the resource slide back up to also show you give you the direct links to the CCS directly, and also to the user manual, and also the link to the download center. And with that, I would like to open it up for questions, either for me or for Carol.
Hi, we are getting quite a few questions in the Q&A right now. I do have one specifically for Carol that I thought I would go ahead and ask since we just wrapped up with her. So it says, question for Carol, is North Face now going after GRS certification based on this requirement of the CCS 3.0 and consumers' need for claim assurance?
Yeah, that's a really great question. We are looking into it, tackling it most likely at a smaller scale. We use quite a bit of recycled synthetic content. And so if we took it all on at once, we would need a really massive database for all those TCs. So we're looking at starting at smaller scale, potentially actually starting with recycled down, certified to the GRS first. I think that actually is maybe a good point for me to make, is to try to start certification small if you're new to it, because it is a lot of documentation management, and if you don't have those systems, it can be hard. When we first started with our certification, we were tracking things on Excel. We do have a platform now that we use, and that has really saved us a lot of time, but just keep that in mind.
Awesome, thank you, Carol. And then one other question I got for the North Face specifically was, how does the North Face manage finished product TCs?
So that is managed in this new platform, well, not actually new anymore, but a platform that we use. It has helped us immensely. We built it with the VF traceability team, and essentially we created a way for us to upload purchase orders to this platform. They get assigned to the appropriate vendor. The vendor gets notified, and they upload all of their documentation against that purchase order. They put in their TC number, they upload the files, they upload bills of lading, transport document numbers, invoices. And so that way, when I'm doing our TC checks and our volume reconciliation, it's a lot easier. We can also send reminders to vendors through that platform. So it's been a lifesaver, honestly.
Amazing, thank you. And I believe that's right now all the questions that we have for you specifically, Carol, although obviously feel free to chime in for anything that you feel like would help our audience understand the CCS 3.0 more. We are getting quite a few questions on just CCS in general and how that pertains to certification of our other standards. So I had just for you, Trini, I had a kind of question or comment come in that says, I would also like to confirm that CCS is not a specific, and then in parentheses, independent certification. Instead, it is always delivered by the CV with another TE certification, in parentheses, OCS, RCS, etc.
That is correct. So the CCS is the foundation of our existing standards. And I'm going to jump back to a different slide here, where we have an overview, because I think it's always easier to understand. So the CCS is the chain of custody for all of our existing standards, but it is not. While you see a label and a logo here, you cannot label as CCS on a final product. It would be under the main standard of the other remaining 7 standards that you see here.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
And I
let's
see, yeah, maybe tied to
Yeah.
that question a little bit, I saw another question come in. So if I'm a brand and I don't want to label and neither use the logo or make a claim, do I have to be certified? And the answer is no. We are a voluntary standard system. And if you are certified, you also are not required to label. However, if you want to label, so only if you want to make a product claim, that is where and why you have to be certified. And I know that can be different to other standard systems where as soon as you are certified, you have to label. We leave that up to you if you want to make a claim or not make a claim, but why not reap the benefits of making a claim if you've gone through all the hard work of getting certified as well?
Awesome, thank you. One of our very first questions that came in that I wanted to get to was, does this mean that for certification bodies, all the requirements are at the ACP, which stands for
Accreditation and certification
procedures. Exactly, yes.
So it's none of the CB specific requirements are still in the CCS itself. They will all be in the CCS certification procedures.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, Trini. Let's go through a few more. And I just wanted to note too, we do have quite a bit of questions coming in. We will have a record. If we don't get to your questions, we will have a record of all of these questions coming in, and we will make sure to get an answer to you if we don't get to it today, because there are quite a few in there. Another one I thought would be important for everyone is someone is getting licensed or audited later this year, and they were wondering if that audit should be for the CCS 2.0 or the CCS 3.0.
We would recommend that it is to the CCS 3.0. It is always good to prepare for an audit and to aspire to the new standard that is out. As I said, though, there is a transition period of a year. You are free to use CCS 2.0 this year, but you will be required to audit or certify to 3.0 next year. So the recommendation is to prepare for CCS 3.0 and get audited under CCS 3.0 when your audit comes up later this year.
Beautiful, thank you. We're also getting quite a few questions in about how the trader fits in to the CCS 3.0, a lot of it around, physical possession of products. So I'll read one question specifically, and that might clear up a few others. But one question that came in says, if a trader chooses to become certified as B1.3, even though they do not take physical possession of products, do they have to receive a TC from their supplier and give a TC to their customer?
So that is, so the physical possession question is one that we receive often. Physical possession means that the product is in your hand or within your, physically with you, and not just basically a financial transaction. And then in terms of the details of trader requirements, who qualifies specifically within your supply chain, we recommend to discuss those specifics with your certification body to make sure that we are not advising something wrong, because there are so many nuances to the trader requirements itself. So I recommend to discuss those specifics with a certification body.
Thank you, Trini. Another question that came in about traders is, how can we verify that the trader is a legal entity without a license?
That is a good question that I don't have the answer to be honest. I would have to get back to you with that. Presumably, and I'm just guessing here, is that there are databases in a specific country where you could verify the legality of a organization.
Great, thank you. Let me find another. There's a lot of great questions coming in, so trying to get to all of you guys and spread out the different topics that are being covered. Here's another question. Could you give an example of what is a brand, in quotes, branded intermediate product for use in further processing steps? What about a branded t-shirt to be sold to printers or other resellers who continue selling the printed item to the final customer?
So that is where I would say the devil lies a little bit in the detail under which standard that occurs. So for the GRS RCS, for example, given that there are social and chemical and environmental requirements, if it is outsourced to a printer, it would constitute a broken chain of custody because if the printer is not certified, for example. However, for other standards of our existing standards where we don't have the social, environmental, and chemical requirements, this might not apply. So again, this is where it lies a little bit in the detail, because what we always want to maintain is a full chain of custody and the full certification throughout.
Great, thank you, Trini. I'm getting some more questions about the TCs, especially in one of the first slides where it kind of showed the process of the TCs and the SCs and how that works with the chain of custody. So one of the questions was, at one of the first slides about TCs, it was shown that there shall not be a TC from the brand to the retailer. I've understood before this webinar that there shall be a TC from brand to retailer. Is it correct that for now there shall not necessarily be a TC from brand to retailer?
Yes, that is correct. We no longer require a TC or outgoing TCs from the brand to the retailer. So that is one of the changes we have made in CCS 3.0, that we basically, for those familiar with that slide, we used to have another TC here, and that has been retired in CCS 3.0.
Great, thank you, Trini. Let's look at some other questions coming in. One of our first questions said, according to CCS 3.0, and this relates, more to the transaction certificates, which I'm not sure if you can answer, Trini, or if it ought to be more of the certification bodies and their specific supply chains, but it says, according to CCS 3.0, which box should we write this non-certified trader company name in the manufacturer's TC? B1.2.23 says the trader is identified on the transaction certificate.
That is a very specific question. We do provide templates of the TCs for the different standards on our website, and I recommend to revisit that there and or check with your certification body if you are not sure which information goes where.
Beautiful, thank you so much. And then I'm getting, a few questions about if you're a brand that are not planning on using our logos and making on product specific claims about if you need to be certified. So Trini, if you just want to reinforce, I know we have talked about this before, but yes. I see a few more questions still coming in. So if you want to just reiterate what we've already said, that would be amazing.
So if you want to label in any way to our standards, you will have to be certified as a brand. If you do not want to label, then you don't have to certify. However, you cannot make any claims either by verbal language on the material or the product to our standards. That said, though, the question sometimes comes up, can I still make a recycled claim, or can I still make an X, Y, and Z claim? So given that our standards are voluntary, we can only specify how you use our logo, how you use wording around our logo. But if you want to label and, let's say, make a general recycling claim without mentioning the GRS or RCS, we always recommend to check the legal requirements in the country of sale, because terms like recycled might be highly regulated in the country of sale. So you might have a certain way how you can label or how you can make a claim. But all of that sits outside of our standards. We can only specify what you can say with regards to our standards. And I also want to flag, I think I did not link that here, but it is on the Download Center. We do have a claims policy that we also update regularly with relevant information. That is really, really helpful to, and also gives you examples about different claims you can make to a given standard. And it is a very nifty document and a good guide to help you determine what you can say and how the logo and label needs to be placed. And you will find that on the Download Center. It's called the Claims Policy. And for those maybe to yeah, we released that document not long ago. And for those who have been with us on the certification journey for a long time, we used to have individual logo use and claims guides per standard. And then the claims policy was basically an umbrella, or is an umbrella policy across all our standards. And the other document that I actually should have put on the resource slide that I want to point out, you can also find those on our standards landing page, is the brand and retailer certification toolkit and the supply chain certification toolkit. So these are two toolkits, guides that are really designed to explain how the system works, where to start, links to the different certification bodies we work with, what the steps are to become certified. So they're really great documents. If you are just starting out in your journey and you are not sure where to start, it could be good to flip through those certification toolkits. I will add those to the slides when we send them out. I'll add the direct link to those slides as well, because those are 3 good documents that I should have mentioned in the first place.
Great, thank you, Trini. We have more questions coming in about labeling and logo usage. One question that came in said, what if a supply chain wants to use the logo / label on their marketing and advertising material? Can only labeling be done by brands?
So if you want to label the final product, if I understand correctly, so there is a, you have to register any claim with a certification body. So if you are looking at a complete product, you would fill out a form, and the certification body will approve you want to make the claim, whether that be online or on the hang tag of the product, or on your website, social media, whatever it might be. But the claims approval process is handled by our certification bodies. There is a, which sounds very similar, but is a little bit different. We have a separate link if you are looking to register your claim to a standard that you will want to make. And maybe we can pop that into the chat box also, or follow up and add that to the list.
Trini, I can jump in with something that I've seen on the brand side in the supply chain, and maybe this will help with some of the questions. So if you're a fabric mill and you are buying GRS certified recycled polyester chip, but your yarn supplier doesn't have certification, you can't put a logo for GRS on your fabric header that says it's GRS, because you have a broken chain of custody. And that's the same for a brand. If we purchased or if we knew that we had yarn from a GRS supplier, but our fabric mill wasn't certified to the GRS, then we also have a broken chain of custody, and we can't claim that that product is made with GRS certified fabric. So I don't know if that helps with some of the questions I'm seeing.
Perfect. Yes, that is a good point. Thank you very much, Carol, because that is actually a question we receive quite frequently, is of entities that source GRS certified fabric or otherwise certified fabric. However, the manufacturer then is not certified, but they do want to label or make a claim to having used GRS certified fabric. And that under our system is not allowed and would constitute a broken chain of custody, because the garment maker would not be certified. So the chain of custody is broken.
Hi, Trini, this is Callie.
Hi, Callie.
Hello. We're getting a couple questions about if a brand is currently using their direct suppliers logo approval or claims approval, how that new process is going to work. And I've answered that question a couple of times in the chat, but I just wanted to speak quickly to the fact that after July of 2022, suppliers will no longer handle the claims approval process with the certification body. So could you just talk a little bit about that shift over to the brand side?
I think I didn't 100% understand the question. Sorry, could you repeat it?
Yeah, so a lot of brands are using their supplier's license number. So their supplier is handling the approval process with the certification body, and the brand is still having direction on, the artwork and kind of managing that process. But some people are asking, so if they're still using their direct supplier's logo, they're not going to have to be certified, right? And I just wanted to clarify that as of next year, the supplier's logo approval process will no longer exist. The brands will be in charge of getting their logo and the claims approved. The suppliers will still be able to attach hang tags on behalf of the certified brand, but the brands won't be able to just pass along their certified supplier's license and logo anymore. They will be the ones in charge of the claims approval process, and so their request at the supplier level won't be allowed to happen after July of next year.
Perfect. Yes, that is great. So the scope of the CCS now ends with a brand. So the brand will have to do that work and get approval for the logos and the claims being made. And for everybody new, this is Callie Weldon, our standard specialist, working with us at Textile Exchange.
Hello.
All right, we have maybe time for one or two more questions if we have any.
Yeah, we have a pretty basic question just to backtrack a second, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. We had a question come in about how do you define a retailer and what is the difference between a brand and retailer? So then people can know if they have to be certified or not.
Yes, I'm gonna jump back to the slide that we had with the definition of brand. So sometimes we talk about brand / retailer. So somebody could be both, selling direct to consumer only or selling under private label. I am searching, please hold, to pull up the definition of brand. So that is where we drew a stronger division, basically, of what is a brand only versus a brand retailer versus a retailer only. And I think we don't have a definition of a retailer, but basically a retailer sells direct to consumer only. As soon as there is any design development or any of this involved, you would be considered a brand and would have to be certified.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, we have, I don't know how much time we want to allocate for more questions or if we want to wrap up and let everyone know that we will be still looking over all the questions that are unanswered in the chat and get back to everyone.
Looking at the time, we probably have to wrap up. I just really wanted to thank you, Carol, for joining us on the webinar today and sharing more about your journey of certification. And also we had a really, really large audience today, which is very, very exciting. Bringing a standard to life always takes a lot of work, a lot of energy. And I know a lot of you have participated in bringing the CCS 3.0 to life. And we are also really excited to support your needs as you're looking at certification. You don't know where to start. Don't be a stranger. Come visit our website, absorb the materials we make available. But also don't be a stranger and feel free to reach out with questions to us to see how we can help. And with that, I thank you all for joining, and I'm going to hand it over back to you, Rose.
Wonderful. Thank you to our speakers, and thank you for participating in today's webinar. Again, as a friendly reminder, an email will be sent to all registered participants with a link to today's presentation. Also, any unanswered questions today will be answered directly to you via email. And that concludes our webinar. Thank you. Goodbye.